Okay, welcome back, everyone. We will now continue with the 2020 RegTech Innovation Summit. I hope you enjoyed your coffee break. As a reminder to participants, we will have a simultaneous speed networking and virtual booths that you can join. The link has just been shared through the chat. And so please feel free to join that throughout the day as you like. So next on the agenda, we have brought together a panel to discuss culture and conduct in the regulatory sphere. This discussion will be moderated by Nizam Ismail, founder and CEO of Ethikom Consultancy. We have about 45 minutes allocated for this panel discussion, and I will share some time reminders towards the end with Nizam, just so we can keep to schedule. And without further ado, Nizam, I would like to pass over to you.
Thanks very much. Good morning, everybody. And thank you for being with us at the Culture and Conduct panel. So I have the pleasure of moderating today's panel. I think it is fair to say that we have seen, in recent times, a greater focus on culture and conduct issues. Certainly, high-profile enforcement actions have shown that rules and regulations, while they are important, are clearly insufficient to promote sound financial services and to foster consumer confidence. So there is a greater focus on not just doing what is legal, but doing what is ethical or what is right. So there is a greater focus on developing culture so that people are instinctively driven to do the right thing. Or is it just a lofty ideal? So is culture and conduct just too fluffy a concept? So here to dissect and debate the issue of culture and conduct are the stellar members of my panel, Avalon Ingram, who looks after financial crime compliance at SWIFT, Kelly Ann McHugh, APAC Director, MyComplianceOffice. John Yeo is also part of the panel. He will be slightly late because he has a call which is overrunning. So we want to make this panel very interactive. So for those of you who are joining us online, please feel free to shoot your questions to the Q&A functions over Zoom. And we will also have a series of poll questions to get people, active and involved, and to get a sensing from the audience on certain issues. So we're going to start with the first one. Can we have the first poll question? Someone from the RegPac team, can we load it up? Okay, so the first question is, how would you describe your interest in today's panel? So I come from A, a financial institution, B, non-financial services, C, a regulatory body, so you could be a regulator, or D, others. So can we have your votes come in? We will give you a few seconds to finish this. Maybe about 5 more seconds. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Okay, interestingly, well, most folks here are from the financial services sector, which is not surprising. We also have quite a fair number of people from non-financial services. We have a regulator in the room. So that's very interesting. And we've got others as well. So it looks like great that you guys are warmed up. Okay, let's go to the next poll. This is a little bit more substantive, and this will be a nice segue for the panel. Do you think that culture and conduct has received sufficient attention? So the next poll question, please. A, yes, B, no, and C, the fence-sitters somewhat. So please cast your votes. Interestingly, so a lot of people are now thinking that it hasn't received enough attention. Okay. So we'll give the poll a few more seconds. Okay, let's end the poll now. And most people think that no is the prevailing sentiment, that it hasn't received enough attention. So that's really interesting. So very good for the panel. So let's kick off with the panel discussion. John is still not here, so I'm going to shoot the first question to Avalon. Avalon, your reactions on the poll responses that people think that there's not enough attention on culture and conduct. And what exactly is culture and conduct? Maybe you could share your thoughts.
So first off, I don't think that the results surprise me. And it's perhaps an area that we haven't been giving a lot of attention to. We tend to focus on our regulatory outcomes, but rather than maybe what influences poor behavior. So what is culture and conduct? It's essentially, a set of beliefs or values or behaviors that influence the way in which we work. And I believe that they're so pivotal in building public trust in financial services, right? And often, it's great to have governance and controls in place, but too often I think that it's conduct that's at the root of misconduct. Sorry, culture rather. Culture is at the root of misconduct.
Thanks. John, welcome to the panel, and thanks for joining us. Sorry. I know you had a hectic morning. Your thoughts, I mean, you look after compliance for a major bank regulated here in Singapore and one of the biggest banks in Malaysia. Your thoughts, has there been enough attention by banks, financial institutions generally on the issue of culture and conduct?
I think over time, there's a lot more focus on this topic. And it is something, I think I wouldn't say it's fairly new. It has been there, just that it has not been a centrally focused topic. So all banks have been measuring the level of adherence to rules. That's one, though how the people behave. And we tend, I think, at this point in time, focus on the negatives. We probably have not spent enough time to celebrate the positives. So if someone does the right thing, we probably think that it is a given, right? But if organization can continue to put in effort to actually embrace and celebrate those right behavior, then it probably shows everyone that, look, this is what we are looking at from a conduct perspective.
Right. But why do you think that, there's been a lot of focus on the negative aspects of culture rather than the positive aspects? Can I just tap your thoughts on that?
I suppose a lot of us are still looking at rules as it is. We are still very much governed by what we can and cannot do, rather than what we should and should not do. At the end of the day, we then say, oh, if the rule says that, we should be doing this. The rule said that we should not be doing this. But the truth is, have we asked ourselves, even without the rules, are we expected to do certain things in a certain manner? And a lot of times, like I said, we do not measure enough of good behavior. But certainly when something goes wrong, it goes through the whole governance process of analyzing what went wrong. And then what do we do to subject the individual to certain actions? And to me, these are all very negative driven rather than positive driven. And conduct is not about driving it negatively. Conduct is about driving it positively.
Okay, interesting. I think we'll talk more about the use of the carrot rather than the stick going on. I think here in Singapore, the MAS has interestingly issued and worked with the industry to issue a set of best practices. But Avalon, to follow on your earlier statement, you said you weren't surprised with the lack of focus on culture and conduct. Do you think that there has been a spate of very egregious breaches from financial services, and whether those breaches, have got anything to do with bad culture or bad conduct?
So I want to first start by apologizing. Quite unhelpfully, my neighbors have just started drilling. So bear with me. But I would say, often when we see the kinds of infringements in the news, it's very rare that it's just sort of one individual that's been involved. And for me, if there's multiple individuals, it's not just someone, lone wolf acting. It's the fact that there has been sign-off or involvement with others, which to me becomes a collective and so starts to become culturally based. And I certainly agree with John that there is an importance on also using good practices and rewarding good practices, because if people don't get rewarded for doing the right thing, it makes it easier to do the wrong thing. And there's also a balance to strike, I think, apologies for this, there's also a balance to strike in what we have as objectives for the individuals within an organization versus, you know, the incentives that we have. And I think we're going to speak about this in a bit more detail later. But those two really need to marry up. We can't have individuals with, for example, huge sales targets that are almost unreachable, and then maybe putting them in a position where they are inclined to do the wrong thing. Let's not make bad practices appetizing.
Thanks, Avalon. Hi, Kelly, I'm turning to you right now. I mean, you've been involved within the compliance community, you know, tracking regulations. From your point of view, what seems to be the impetus or the backdrop behind recent regulatory interest in the issue of culture and conduct? Your thoughts on this?
Yeah, it's super interesting. I've been in this industry for quite some time now, and realistically, you know, the global financial crisis, 2008, really did set off this trend to try and focus on culture and conduct. And I feel like I've been reading articles about regulators wanting to improve culture and conduct in organizations for at least 10 years. And yet we're still here having these conversations as to how to measure it, and having an information paper come out with, you know, you should have a cultural dashboard, which you absolutely should, 10, 12 years after the GFC. This area of compliance, I guess, just keeps coming up more and more as organizations are being enforced on this topic. There is a distinct lack of controls in place in firms, it seems, based on the enforcements, related to culture and conduct and ensuring that individuals are doing the right thing. I mean, at the end of the day, we can put out all of the guidance in the world and regulation, but this comes down to people, right? It comes down to hiring the right people, training the right people, and then monitoring those people to do the right thing by their customer. And I guess, you know, more and more we're having to see the right things put in place in terms of incentives and remuneration to get there. And look, I feel like firms, particularly in the more established markets, have got processes in place and have been doing the right thing or trying to do the right thing in this space for some time. And there's just a bit of a lag. So, yeah.
Okay, that brings us, I think that's a nice segue into our next poll question, poll number 3. Can we have the question up? And the question is really what would be needed to effect real change in culture and conduct? So is it more regulations? Or is it, as John mentioned, you know, we need more positive reinforcement rather than negative ones, carrot rather than the stick? Or is it the tone at the top, leadership, you know, getting the right people in? So what are your thoughts on that?
Sorry, was that for me?
Let's let the respondents finish the
It
poll.
looks like we've got some initial responses coming through, which is great.
Yeah, it's interesting. So actually the prevailing thought is that, you know, tone at the top is important, and carrot more than more regulations, carrot rather than the stick. Kelly, since you're still on, what your thoughts on this? What's your response to the poll responses?
I think it's almost a B and C, and then probably tone in the middle, right? I think we've started to see the tone at the top come in place, you know, and the people at the top are being let go left, right, and center. If it's not the case, we need to get this more in the tone in the middle, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. John,
Sorry.
Go ahead, John.
I kind of agree with Kelly that, you know, tone from the top is certainly important, but because in larger organization where the top and the working group may not necessarily, there'll be a large gap, right? So that tone from the middle, which really filter down what is needed to be done, is very, very important. And they are the ones who are able to actually influence, in my view, a lot more on the behavior on the people on the ground. And then what we need to do is to get people on the ground to echo what has been established at the top and the middle. And it's important for them to then see people at the top, people at the middle walk the talk. It's not about nice mission statement. It's not about nice measurements and everything else, but it's really carrying out those little things that we all should embrace. And if one see someone doing it, they tend to want to do the same, right? And to me, that's important.
Thanks for that. John, since you're on right now, I know you were involved in the recent initiative by the MES to issue a set of information paper on culture and conduct, and that complements the whole individual accountability guidelines. So really a lot more focus, at least in Singapore, on personal accountability, culture and conduct. I think you earlier referred to carrot rather than the stick, positive reinforcements. So maybe you can shed some light on this process, the thinking behind the information paper.
So I mean, for those who followed the whole events of what has been issued in September, there was this consultation that was issued by MES a couple of years ago to see how do you want to approach this entire topic, which is not an easy topic in my view. It is very qualitative. And I think the truth is, most organizations in the industry are still struggling in how do I measure it, and how do I effectively promote it. So the approach that the regulator has taken is really a non-prescriptive approach, where they know that good behavior has to be driven by very much the organization themselves. And then this is where the establishment of that steering group within ABS and MES helps and aims to create and enforce that belief in promoting good culture. So when MES issued that IAC, we call it in short, we thought as a group it would be good to provide, collaborate with them and provide that our input on some practical guidance, into helping the industry get a better sense of how they can actually improve or enhance on what they have already in place, or if already not in place. And as a group, there are more to come. That's what I can promise you. In fact, this morning we just had another council meeting, and there will be a lot of things that we will be rolling out to help the industry to look at this. But the truth is really, at the end of the day, we want it to be a self-governance kind of a process, whereas the regulator continue to provide non-prescriptive guidance together with the industry. And at the same time, they still continue to play their role as an enforcement agency, right, for things that have gone wrong. And we all agree that as industry, can we then say there will no more scandals? I don't think we can ever say that. Will there be no more bad actors? I don't think we can promise that as well. But we could certainly try to move towards that. And where we are today, I think we are still relying a lot on lagging indicators, so to speak, to measure where we are. Are we then able to develop more leading indicators? Because culture and conduct is a behavioral thing. Are we able to marry data into behavioral science to better predict what can potentially go wrong and make sure it does not happen?
Thanks for those insights, John. I think it was very interesting reading through the information paper, because inherently it's very difficult, as you put it, to approach a very qualitative subject and to put in place, what financial institutions are more used to. How do you measure certain aspects of culture and conduct? What are the different components? Interestingly, there is also an attempt to fold culture and conduct into an organization's risk management framework. So that's quite, forward-looking. So there is even a suggestion that financial institutions have a conduct and culture restatement. So that articulates the extent of, what is your risk appetite when it comes to culture and conduct? How do you measure this? And there's always a challenge because you're attempting to put quantitative metrics into something inherently qualitative. And also, it goes into things like governance, performance management, and even a segment on the role of setting the tone at the middle, as John put it, because that has a more direct impact. Avalon, turning to you, question to you is how do you think financial institutions are ready or not for this new regime where you try to measure culture and conduct, and also you're looking at things like dashboarding and indicators?
So I would say that it's always going to depend on the institution in terms of their maturity for these sorts of things. I think those firms that have had exposure to the UK senior manager regime, there's been a lot of influence already there when it comes to things like culture and conduct. So perhaps they're going to be more ready. But the point is, you're right, it's behavioral. No one walks into an institution and can say, show me your culture, and someone can kind of whip it out and there, have my yardstick to measure it. And that's where the challenge comes in. So the approach, I think, is to really start to dissect what it means to have a good culture. What are those different elements? So sure, tone from the top, individual accountability, looking at things like remuneration. And the approach I think that firms are going to have to take is to really start dissecting this. The other side of it is this idea of regulatory fatigue, right? So I think the one good thing is everyone says, no, what we don't need is more regulation. But then how do we spur on individuals within these institutions to take on board? And I think the key in this is communication and transparency. So yes, having a statement, having everyone know what the strategy is around it and being bought in, and not sort of having this shroud over the inner workings of an institution. So senior managers make decisions and that's it. What we need to have is transparency. And I think communication, transparency are the keys to culture.
Thanks for that. John, turning to you, what about smaller financial institutions? I think for bigger FIs, they have the resources to track a lot of, these indicators, or to decide what are the indicators for culture and conduct, and to track this and, to have a more formal structure. But what about smaller financial institutions? How should they look at culture and conduct in your view?
Sorry, good question, right? As we were deliberating this as a group, we realized that obviously you're right. For the larger organization, they have the know-how, they have the resources to carry those out. So as a group, what we wanted to do is to continue to provide support to the industry, create a framework that is applicable to the different size of the organizations, to allow them to actually pick and choose at their different level of maturity. Obviously, some are more advanced than the others. And then by continuing to share all those, they can leverage, and they know that they're not on their own, right? And have to start from scratch. And because we have intentionally structured in a sense where these are practice notes in a buffet style, where you can actually pick and choose what is relevant to you, I think such an approach will actually help the smaller organizations to jumpstart if they have not already started on the journey, or if they are, I don't know if I use the right word, clueless in how to get it done because of know-how, because of resource. This will actually allow them to take the 2 steps forward and then say, yeah, these are good practical notes. I will use them. I will make use of them. And we also intend to continue to roll out a series of educations to allow them to attend, to participate, and hopefully that helps them in deciding how they should actually do it. So the long story short is we want to tell them they are not alone. We will give you practical guidance depending on your size, depending on your maturity, and then you pick from there and you implement it accordingly. And hopefully that helps.
There's a question by Guy Shepherd on how do panelists suggest that culture can be measured and what metrics should be used. Kelly, your thoughts on this? How should we measure culture and conduct? What are the challenges?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's what a lot of people have been still grappling with over the last few years is how do we measure culture and conduct? And I think there's a number of key metrics that you can utilize to do that. Obviously, there's the standard metrics that you should have in your various dashboards, like, the number of violations of policy, the number of cases that have been, raised against individuals in your firm for breaching policy, the number of performance incidents or the number of individuals who haven't met their performance standards as set by HR, as an example. So you have your kind of standard metrics with regards to misconduct in general. But then, maybe it's even the number of people who haven't made it through probation, right? But then there's other areas that are important from a cultural perspective around your organization. Staff sentiment surveys are a very easy and effective way to get the opinion of everyone from the janitor almost through to the senior management as to what they're seeing on the ground. How do they feel they are being rewarded for good behavior? Are they feeling like individuals are being reprimanded for bad behavior? So I think surveys are a quick and easy tool to help figure out whether there's the right culture that you expect. Every organization, when you're setting it up and going forward, is going to have some values and some vision as to what you want to achieve. Is everyone behind that vision without compromising the interest that you should have in your customer, not in your own self? So I think, staff sentiment surveys, whistleblowing statistics, misconduct cases are some of the most easiest ways to measure conduct.
Thank you for that. And just a note to the audience, keep those questions coming in. So, use this opportunity to ask the questions from the panel. Now it's time for another poll. So can the poll master please load up poll question 4? And this talks about RegTech solutions. Since this event is organized by RegPac and there's a focus on innovation, the question is, how effective do you think RegTech solutions can be to help comply with culture and conduct issues? So A, very effective, B, somewhat effective, and C, not effective. So let's see your votes.
Okay, there's a few more of you logged in. See that polling question?
So Nizam, while waiting for the poll results, I just want to share my view that, in fact, a lot of organizations are already tracking some of those indicators highlighted by Kelly, right? It's just that they may not have necessarily put them under the conduct and culture dashboard, but they are certainly tracking them already. So one of the things that we all talk about is that we tend to focus on the negative, right? Number of breaches, number of non-completion, this and that. And certainly that still give a very negative connotation on how organization manages the culture and conduct. And people like to call it culture and conduct risk. Why is that a risk? And why is it not something else, a more positive spin than a risk? So it still goes back to my earlier point of, are we showing enough courage, right, to incentivize the right behavior? At the end of the day, do we necessarily track, for example, as we were discussing in the group earlier, the number of products or processes that we decided to drop because as a group, as an organization, we felt that this is detrimental to the customers, right? The fact is that I don't think many of us do that now, but it's something that we can probably think about. And if everyone knows that this is what the management is thinking about, then they will have more confidence that that's the tone from the top, right?
Absolutely.
They know that's the right thing to do. And that is important.
Go ahead, Kelly. Your reflections on what John said and also on the poll results, which have come in, and people think that, yeah, I think RegTech solutions can either be somewhat effective or very effective in addressing culture and conduct. Your response to that, Kelly?
Yeah, I was just going to say, to John's point with regards to some of those metrics, like how many business opportunities have you stopped pursuing because of regulatory or conduct risk? I know Thomson Reuters does this in their annual culture and conduct risk survey that they release. 34% of firms in their last result said that they had thrown away an opportunity due to conduct risk potential issues. So that's a positive sign. That's positive that organizations are thinking about culture and conduct when coming up with new ideas and business opportunities. With regards to the poll results, I'm disappointed that somebody said not effective at all. You know, I work for a RegTech that is one of 3 RegTechs in the Singapore FinTech Association listing that mentions conduct within it. There is probably, maybe there's a lack of awareness that there are RegTech solutions out there to assist with cultural and conduct risk issues, as opposed to the typical financial crime, which seems to be a very crowded market from a RegTech perspective. There are absolutely solutions that can help facilitate your cultural and conduct risk outcomes. You know, you have policies in place for a reason. It's not just about the initial onboarding and training on those policies, which is absolutely critical, but that ongoing reminder around your policies and procedures that must be in place from a cultural perspective. So I think RegTech can have a place and a very effective way of enforcing your policies within your organization.
Maybe my view, perhaps we are still at the near to the starting block of deploying RegTech to manage culture and conduct risk, and perhaps we have not seen enough success stories. That is where people get the impression to see, you know, how is it going to help? And Kelly, you're right, because we earlier said that this is not a topic that is easily quantified. You know, it's behavioral science, right? It's a bit of psychology and things like that. Then how do you actually measure them? How is data? How do we utilize data to measure some of this thing? How are we able to use artificial intelligence, for example, to predict some of this? Because we are probably at the start of the journey. I think there'll be more success stories as we explore this avenue. The result of the poll may change if you were to ask this 12 months down the road, maybe.
Thank you.
It's just add to that. I think Ben Quinlan of the Hong Kong FinTech Association has some interesting thoughts on this, and he was saying that training is so imperative, you know, having these different online courses, maybe that's through technology, be that RegTech, but what we need to be able to measure as well is that engagement. So on the other end of the computer, am I just clicking through to get this course done? And maybe that's where we do start to have data metrics coming out of this. Maybe it's that we can then see that Avalon Ingram sort of swept her way through this manual in 5 minutes because she had a load of other things that she wanted to get done. Or is it that I got X amount of questions wrong? And then what is the follow-up action thereafter? So does senior management then have visibility on the behavior throughout that training? And then, you know, if someone's always late to complete their training, if someone, as I say, zoomed through it or got a lot of questions wrong, what are then the follow-up actions? And I think that's how we can clearly understand if someone is maybe on board with it. So we have a practical way of tackling the issue.
Thanks for that, Avalon. And I think my sensing is that, you know, this will push RegTech solution providers to really be very creative on, you know, addressing culture and conduct more than financial crime or AML, CFT, you know, use cases. But I think this is a very interesting sphere. But, you know, Avalon, your thoughts in an ideal world, you know, where, you know, everyone's gotten their culture and conduct correct, and you've got, you know, nice, perfect resources. What would a workplace look like in that, you know, hopefully not utopian vision?
I don't know if we can ever get to that, because there's always so many different factors that are going to be at play. This idea of strain theory, that I might behave in a different manner because of something else that's influencing me. This has been described in the wake of COVID, right? So individuals who have lost their jobs, who might now be involved in nefarious activity, be that, you know, government stimulus checks they're actually not, they shouldn't be applying for. That same kind of thing can happen to an individual within an organization, no matter how good that culture is. So I think it's great that we strive for a utopia, and what the outcome is a better and a safer place for our customers, which I think is a very important thing. It's a better and safer place for every participant within the financial services market as well. So yes, I think the overall impact is having a good culture within an institution, but having that is so far reaching to building a better ecosystem. And that's why it's having the, I guess, light that it is in now, because it is so far reaching in terms of impact.
John, your thoughts? I mean, coming from a bank and also more importantly as part of the working group, what would be your ideal scenario? What is the working group striving towards?
Well, I can't speak on behalf of the working group, but in my personal perspective, it will be a place where there's no rules and everyone does what's right.
No rules? You think that's possible?
Nah, I don't think so. I agree with Avalon. There's just so many factors that will influence one's behavior, right? At the end of the day, what we can only do is to continue to reinforce what is the right behavior, and hopefully over time people understand it, people embrace it, and people want to practice them. At the end of the day, rules will still be rules, right? Rules will still be there for a purpose, so that like I just said, at the end of the day, the regulators still need to play their role of an enforcement agency, and they actually need rules to be able to then determine whether you have done something wrong, you know, in breach of their regulations. So rules will always be important, but what I'm hoping to achieve, if you have that ideal situation where you have the right resources and everything else is in place, everyone follow the spirit of the rules and not just the letter of the rules.
Okay, let me go one step further, John. What would you suggest would be the first 2 or 3 steps that a financial institution can take to be more compliant with culture and conduct issues? In 3 very practical steps.
Well, let's see how should I break it down, right? One, I still hold on to the view that, you know, the action speaks louder than words. So what we earlier talked about, the tone, we need to continue to exhibit those tones from the top, from the medium, from the middle, and then translate that into action point. And if you continue to do enough of that, I think people would then embrace it, right? Second is, again, another point that I talked earlier. We need to celebrate the good things that people had done. I think a lot of times we are really focusing on the negatives. And once you focus a lot on the negative, people become wary, right? At the end of the day, what if I done something wrong? But if I know that if I do something right, I get recognized in one way or another, not necessarily through a bigger pay increment or a bigger bonus, but I get recognized. And a lot of times people tend to disregard that intangible recognition. You know, I believe if we take a quick poll, do you feel good when someone tells you have done good? I think a lot of them put their hand and say, yeah. You know, the reward, that little praise is probably better than $100 more I get, or a voucher that I get for recognizing what I've done right. So I don't think we have done enough of that. So those are the 2 things. And next, obviously, you know, if we could reinforce through engagement, where, you know, the seniors, hopefully with more experience, are able to share how to do the right things, right? A lot of times people, it's not that they do not want to do the right things, but they do not necessarily know how to do it, right? Because a lot of times there's judgment involved. and they may not be experienced enough to make those judgments. And if we have enough of those sharing sessions, I believe it allows people to then think about, apart from their own upbringing, what is really the right thing to do and how do I approach it? And if the seniors can do that, again, it echoes the kind of culture that they want to build within the organization.
Thanks for that, John. Kellyanne, I mean, from a RegTech perspective, what do you think? In terms of an approach towards culture and conduct, what do you think the RegTech community can do to perhaps provide more comprehensive coverage of culture and conduct, as well as to show good use cases so that to convince financial institutions of the value that RegTech providers can bring?
Sure. And again, I'm just going to go back to something John said before as well around rewarding good behavior. I think what was interesting in Singapore's guidance that they've published is around whistleblowing, an area that Singapore has not really focused on before, on rewarding whistleblowers and making that more prominent within financial institutions here. I think it's a fantastic way to give recognition to people who speak up and say the right thing, and the MAS has put that all through that white paper. So I think that's a fantastic area. And it is an area of from a RegTech perspective, or certainly from a compliance outsourcing perspective, that can be utilized as a good example and use case for encouraging individuals to speak up, to raise concerns, to self-report conduct issues from a RegTech perspective. Look, our RegTech focuses on conflicts of interest management. So a way of digitally recording the behavior of individuals, whether that's their own trading behavior, their own outside business activities, which might be taking them away from their work, can all be recorded and monitored with the solutions in RegTech space. I think another area that is coming up in terms of conduct and RegTech is being able to build those dashboards and analytics from all of the various outputs from a solution like ours. One of the challenges that I see throughout Asia Pacific is the lack of compliance technology in general for managing your regulatory obligations, the tasks and activities the organization needs to do. And if everything's on spreadsheets or email or a PDF, a manual document, you can't get any insight at all to produce this cultural dashboard that the MAS in particular is talking about. So I think being able to digitalize the actions of your policies is a great first step in moving into the culture and conduct measurement space.
Thanks for that, Kellyanne. And John, turning back to you, from the financial institution's point of view, how would you look at RegTech solutions? Is that a silver bullet, or is there something more that needs to be done?
So to me, again, those very much are the hardwares of what the institution can put in place. From a managing culture and conduct perspective, I think there's still a lot of software that we could do, truly, at the end of the day. And this is really the influencing of one's behavior. That would be, to me, I think, very, very important. We can continue to come up with very nice dashboard, nice KRIs. And the truth is, what do we do with them, right? It's important. No point presenting statistics to say, yeah, we have 4 cases of whistleblowing. Yeah, we have 2 cases of breaches and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, what is the outcome that we want, right? So to me, bring the two together will be important for us to manage this holistically. RegTech certainly will help in minimizing the effort that we want to know, because knowing is important. Only when we know them, then we could manage them, from stats point of view. So I agree, Kelly, that I think a lot of financial institutions today are still struggling with putting all this data together while we are tracking them, but we may not be able to track them. So if there's something else to help us on this, then we can focus our energy on, looking at the outcome. All right.
Thanks for that. I think we're coming to the end of the panel, but I think just to sum up, I think the issues of culture and conduct have really come front and center in focus. Regulators are putting a lot more attention to this. I think there's a need to rethink the approach, whether it's regulations versus best practices guide. And I think some balance is needed. And also, I think RegTech can provide a very good tool to help people comply with culture and conduct issues. But at the same time, I think more is needed in terms of the attitude of financial institutions. It's not rocket science. It's about, setting the right tone at the top or tone in the middle and, walking the talk. So with that, thanks very much for joining us. And thanks to the panel, stellar panel for their, terrific insights. And I'm going to hand you back over to AJ.
Great. Thank you, Nizam, and all panelists for sharing your insights and expertise. As a reminder to all participants, we have a simultaneous speed networking and virtual booths, which you can join. Again, the link for that will be sent sporadically throughout the day. For our next topic on the agenda, we have the pleasure of watching a pre-recorded chat between Jean-Christophe